Welcome back to episode 30 of the Star Wars Newsnet's Timeline Show. My name is Tyler, and joined by my co-host, as always, for the Star Wars Newsnet Timeline Show, Mr. Luke. How are we doing today, Luke Sheehan, my fellow master of the Timeline Show?
We're doing pretty well, and we're getting to talk about Into the Dark today. So I really like this book, which means I'm having an even better day today.
So Into the Dark is a High Republic book by Claudia Gray. It was the second High Republic book that was launched when the High Republic Initiative started a few years ago. And Claudia Gray, if you are not familiar with Claudia Gray's work as a Star Wars author, you need to familiarize yourself because she has written some absolute bangers out there in the Star Wars publishing world. If you have not read Lost Stars, you should absolutely go pick that up at your local library, buy it at your at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, wherever you buy your books. It is a fantastic read for many people, I would say, and Luke, jump in here. For many people, it's like their number 1, 2, or 3 favorite Star Wars book of all time. I feel like that's the one I hear of almost all the time from people in terms of like, oh, this is on the A-list High Republic, or sorry, just A-list Star Wars books. And then she's also written Princess Leia, Princess Leia, Princess of Alderaan, which is another fantastic read. So Claudia Gray absolutely cooks in Star Wars. She also wrote Bloodlines, so like she absolutely cooks in Star Wars. So it's not a shocker that she was given, one of the first books of the High Republic to be released.
Absolutely. I am actually in chapter, I believe, 11 of Bloodline right now. And I have read Lost Stars. I have read Leia, Princess of Alderaan. Those are very good reads. She gets Leia very well. And I think you even told me that as I was starting to get into Star Wars books. You were like, I think you should read some Claudia Gray stuff. She gets Leia really well. So she really does.
Writes Leia better than Claudia Gray. And I've read a lot of Leia comics, novels. No one writes Leia better than Claudia Gray. Like there's just something about the way she pins that character that is just absolutely is like a level of grace mixed in with the attitude and the adventurous and just the nobility of Leia. But also like the fierceness of Leia as well. The passion comes out. Like she just encapsulates, I feel like, who Carrie Fisher was and brought to that character as she writes. It's just better than anyone else. And I will say, not to discredit other people who have written Leia, I will say Beth Revis has done a great job of writing Leia in the Princess and Scoundrel book. I was pleasantly surprised by that. I absolutely adore that book as well. So, Into the Dark, set in 232 BBY. Here we go. I'm going to give a brief synopsis of this book, and Luke, jump in if I miss some things. But essentially what we're going to do, we're going to have this brief synopsis of the book, and then Luke and I are going to dive into the characters from this book. And we're meeting most of these characters for the first time in the timeline. So it's important that we establish a good baseline of where we're at with these people when we meet them at the end of the book and our favorite moments basically throughout this. Because there's a lot in Into the Dark that happens. Just like Light of the Jedi was a crazy one. Into the Dark has even, not as much jam-packed in there, but there's definitely plenty to dive into.
Absolutely. It's one of those books where the characters are moving from like planet to planet, place to place quite a bit. There's a lot of moving parts to this. And I think Claudia Gray does it well. She keeps everything in check. The characters go on adventures and then sub adventures, and then like there's subsets of adventures here going on, and it's fun. It's really nice to see someone kind of as aloof as Wreath paired kind of with Affy, who's very down to earth and kind of hard nosed, nitty gritty. So
yes,
fun stuff to see here in this book.
Let us dive into it. Here we go. Our main character here that we're going to follow in a lot of these young adult novels is Wreath Silas. And Wreath's master at the beginning of this book is Jorah Morali, which, if you followed us and watched the Live the Jedi pod last week, you know that she dies at the end of that book. But at the beginning of this book, this is before she has died. This is before like the big battles that take place, before the dedication of Starlight Beacon. It takes place right before Light of the Jedi actually begins. It kind of, they cross over almost immediately, but his master is ready for him to join her on the frontier. Wreath is very much a homebody, wants to be an archivist and study the archives, and he gets into this mission while his master is away. He gets into a mission to head out to the frontier to go to Starlight Beacon to meet up with his master, and he is joined by Jedi Comac Vitus, who you can see right here. And if you're not watching, you know, he's got the elegant red robes, a brilliant blue lightsaber with a bit of a curved handle on it, and his friend that he is traveling with is Wayseeker Orla Jarini, who has, if you remember, like Darth Ray, like Dark Ray's lightsaber. It's kind of a similar lightsaber to that, where it has the shift to become like the double-bladed lightsaber, but also kind of retracts back into like a closer handled double-bladed lightsaber. And she's a Wayseeker. We have talked about Wayseekers at this point. She's still a Jedi, but is on her own mission to discover the Force. And they are on a ship called the Vessel. And of course, if you are following, you know, High Republic, you know about the Vessel. And yes, that is the name of the ship. It is not just, you know, a tagline that we're calling it. That is the actual name. It is it is led by Affie Hollow, who is the daughter of the leader of the Buying Guild, which is like the big, you know, basically they're, what would you say, Luke? That they are like the in charge of transports. They do a lot of transports, shipping runs, things like that, a lot of exports.
Yeah, exactly. They are kind of like, I don't know, I kind of picture them like Amazon or some type of like FedEx, like they're
Yeah.
delivering a lot of packages, even people maybe sometimes, but yeah, they are the people who get stuff done. Here they move stuff
Mhm.
all around the galaxy.
And all of his Leox Giassi is one of the pilots of the vessel. And then, of course, we have our favorite Vintian, which is Geode, who is, yes, a sentient rock. And whenever they are traveling, they get thrown out of hyperspace because they are traveling at the exact same time that the great disaster occurs. And hyperspace basically becomes, as Luke eloquently told me before, it becomes
Sick is how they describe it.
and they get stranded on the Amaxine station, which, if you are following some of the Star Wars comics, then you will remember the futuristic version of the Amaxine station. But this is several few hundred years before that. And they get stuck there where they meet Nan Haig, and Nan, as we will find out later, is a member of the Nile, but right now she's pretending to be helpless traveler with her mentor. And ultimately, on this, you know, as they are stuck here, they find these idols imbued with the dark side, and they are so worried about the idols and this dark side threat that they decide to kind of form a protective bond over it, bring them back to the temple, and break the hold of the dark side once they're allowed to leave the Amaxine station. While they're on the Amaxine station, of course, Jedi Knight Des Ryden is killed on this mission, or so they think. Raiden and Wreath shared the same master, and so that was like a bit of a bond they had. So they had a lot of heavy losses. They get back to the temple, realize that the idols were not imbued with the dark side necessarily. They were keeping dark side on the station at bay. Wreath also realizes that Nan and Haig are part of the Nile, and this hits home extremely hard because he finds out his master has died at the hands of the Nile. Comac and Orla are very frustrated at their failure because they also go back and forth with some flashbacks of a failure they had on a previous mission together. We go back to the Amaxian station. We encounter the Dringir for the first time. They are the sentient dark side plants. And we also discover that they have been holding Desrighten captive on one of their main home worlds, which we will talk about how Reith gets transported to that world when they go back to the station. They ultimately encounter the Nile, fight off the Dringir, fight off the Nile, try to keep them in bay, but they cannot. The book pretty much ends with Reith becoming Colmac's apprentice, Orla going on her Wayseeker journey, and kind of really sets the stage for what this fight against the Nile is going to be in the young adult novels, but also what this fight against the Dringir is going to be in some of the comics, and also make its way into the novels as well. And throughout this, there's a lot of things going on, which we will get into. Reith is saved by Geode at the end of this book. He has a brief encounter with Nan, who he saves at the beginning of the book. She lets him go at the end. There's a lot of things circulating. Comac Vitus's struggles with the Jedi way. There is a lot to unpack here. Luke, did I miss anything pressing that happened that we need to make sure, like, hey, let's talk about this before we get into the characters?
I think that covers the major points of this story. They show up, they feel the dark side, they mistake it for the idols. It's really the Drengir. They are imbued, not imbued, but they are absolutely like tied to the dark side. They use the dark side. That's kind of their thing. And yeah, I do kind of like just this whole High Republic thing. Like these books are feeding the comics. The comics will then tie back into the books. It's really kind of cool how this all works. If you have the opportunity to read all of these, it's going to make it awesome. But I think they do an okay
But if you
job
don't,
at
you can just follow us along here on the timeline show on
exactly.
Saturdays, and we'll break it all
Exactly.
down for you, and you will not miss a single thing that happens in the Star Wars canon universe.
Exactly. So yeah, Claudia Gray sets up a lot of different storylines that spin out of this book, but she does a really good job setting them up here.
Yeah.
Especially Nan, she is going to be a recurring character throughout the rest of phase one, really, yeah, really phase one of the High Republic. So good old switcheroo there. Actually, Reith kind of falls for her a little bit. I think he has a little bit of a crush on Nan. So it's kind of fun that there's a little interplay there as well.
So let's dive into the characters and talk about our favorite moments from them, like their arcs, their different journeys they went on throughout the book. But first, where did this book fall on you in terms of like phase one in general? To me, it's not Claudia Gray's best book. It's not a bad book by any means. I think it's her better of her like two main novels from the High Republic so far, absolutely. And which is the second one is The Fallen Star, which we'll be getting to later on here in the phase one portion of the High Republic, timeline show, books. However, it wasn't, I wouldn't say call this like an A-list like novel. This isn't in the S tier per se, but I would still say that, this was just a really solid addition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Light of the Jedi and Rising Storm are the highlights of this phase one of the High Republic. And I would say that this is maybe the fourth best book for me in phase one. I'll put it there because I've got Light of the Jedi, Rising Storm, Midnight Horizon, maybe my top three, and maybe Into the Dark slots in at a number 4 slot. So
It's kind of
it's up
interesting how we
there.
have like the same top 4, I would say. I need to make
Yeah.
sure that that's true, but like I Midnight Horizon is really high on my list as well. So let's start with Reith. He is
Yeah.
by all means, he is the main character of this book. He is the one that we follow the most. He is probably the heart of this story. And here we have just some like concept art here of like, his mission attire as we go on this journey. He is still a Padawan, of course, in this book. And Luke, I personally love the idea. Like, I don't necessarily relate to Reith a lot in the sense that he is like this nerd that wants to be in the archives. He does not want to leave the library and explore the galaxy. He feels so at home just chilling in the archives. I don't want to leave Coruscant. I am terrified of this. So I don't really relate with Reith from that perspective. But what I do really love about Reith is he will acknowledge himself that he is not the most powerful in the Force. Like his attunement to the Force is not as natural as many of the other Padwans and younglings that he has grown up with. However, he makes up for that with extreme dedication to what he is good at. He is super devoted to becoming better each day, and he's able to absolutely make up that like gap in terms of like natural ability and exceed so many of the others because of his hard work.
Yeah, I think he's the embodiment of hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Hmm.
He's absolutely, I mean, in the very beginning of this book, it's said that he's telling us that he's coming in first or at the top of his class, near the top of his class, and like each of these classes that he's taking in Jedi Academy or whatever you want to call the Jedi
Right.
school, Jedi Order. Um, but he absolutely acknowledges that like he is really not naturally gifted
Hmm.
at lightsaber dueling, at wielding the Force. But through his hard work, he's a very good Jedi.
Hmm.
He even is almost a little better than Comac sometimes with dueling or certain aspects. He kind of rivals some Jedi masters because he studies so much. He will know things that sometimes they don't. He's a really good addition because he's just super studious.
Hmm.
And I gotta say, I I do relate to him probably more than you. I often like to stay in my zone. I like to
Hmm.
maybe explore when the time calls for it.
Right.
If it's planned, I'm not extremely spontaneous. So
Right.
for him to be like, I just want to stay on Coruscant and read my
Hmm.
books, I'm like, not 100% I relate, but like pretty
Hmm.
sizable portion of me is like, I get your wreath. Like, I
Hmm.
don't want to put myself in danger needlessly, but
Hmm.
if duty calls, I shall go. So, um, I related
I
pretty
love his
hard.
journey of like self-discovery throughout this book. His
Yes.
master before she dies, his essentially her last lesson to him, and then was a riddle that he had to figure out, and it was why can no Jedi cross the Kyber Arch alone? And he's wondering to himself, he's like, Jedi cross the Kyber Arch alone all the time. Like you just have to watch your foothold. We have the Force. Watch your steps, and you can go through the Kyber Arch without you know someone else being there. And that's something he struggles trying to figure out what she really means. What's the wisdom behind that? And she believes it is imperative for him to experience the frontier, to experience life outside the temple. And you know, he very much is against that. He even in one of his logs, like his personal logs, basically writes out how a bad idea it is for this to happen. And basically comes up with this whole argumentative essay for why he should remain on Coruscant despite her, wanting him to go. And it's really what I loved is him going on this journey, coming back when he knows she dies, and he's ready to get back out on the frontier to right some of the wrongs that happened at the Amaxian station. And then he learns the lesson of the Kyber Arch at the end, and is like then seeking out a master in Comac who will lead him out to the frontier, who will lead him out of his comfort zone because he's fulfilling his master's wishes, but also because he realizes that that's what he needs to do to be the best Jedi he can be for a little while as well.
Definitely. His arc in this book is maybe one of the best arcs in my opinion in phase 1.
Hmm.
I really like him, and I think it's nice that he is paralleled with um Des Ryden, who is
Hmm.
like his opposite. So they both had Jorah Mali as their master, and Des
Hmm.
was all about adventure. He wanted to be constantly seeking danger and adventure. I think there's even a cool little drop that he goes to Dantooine, which is first mentioned in A New Hope.
They're all done to me.
Yeah.
See, Lord Vader, she can be reasonable.
I I'm forgetting. It was either Dantooine or Zeitooine, but it was one of those
It was a
throw off
it was a
ones.
tween. It was a
It was
tween.
definitely a Tooine. So, um, wow, the journey that Des goes on in this, he is presumed dead. He is actually
Tortured by the
just
Dringir.
tortured by the Drangir, loses his mind almost, but is brought back. Um, at the end of the book, we find that he's alive. He gets saved. We get him back. We get him helped, and he's actually one of the first person we know that goes on the Barash vow in the High
Mhm,
Republic.
mhm.
We have heard of the
So
Barash vow in the comics that
mhm,
Charles Soule did, but
yes.
first person in the High Republic that goes on the Barash vow.
Mhm. If you've been following along with the timeline show, we know that Barash was, Porter Ingle, who we met in Light of the Jedi. That is his sister, and she ends up coining the Barash vow by basically it's when a Jedi does something that they deem I almost like inconsolable or like irredeemable, and they feel like they need to go in isolation to discover themselves. But in Dez's instance, he feels almost like he lost his lifeline and connection to the Force to some degree with the drink gear, but also
Yeah,
realized it brought up all of like these things that he had been doing wrong, like seeking too much adventure, personal glory. And he was like, I need to go get right. Like, I need to absolutely dedicate however much time I need to fix myself and my connection with the Force before I can rejoin the Order. And yeah, you're right. That was the first person in the High Republic we saw take the Barash vow in terms of release order. Because in course in Star Wars, we always have to clarify the release order versus the timeline order. So, of course, release order, he is the first to do that. And Reith, after going on these journeys with Dez and Comac and Orla, I love how at the end he learns why no Jedi can, take and walk the Kyber Arch alone. And that's because every single like kyber crystal that is there or added to it is because of a Jedi that has given themselves to the order, or representative of a Jedi that gave their lives to protecting the light and protecting, the people of the galaxy. And that you cannot walk the life of a Jedi, you cannot walk on the kyber arch without acknowledging all of the ones that have come before, and you take a little bit of those, people with you throughout. And in my opinion, this is kind of similar in the way that a Jedi kind of views the Order and the ones that have come before as their family. And like that is in a sense their like ancestry, because they kind of leave their families behind. And that's how like we can kind of relate when we think about like our family members that we take before us and the legacy of our families and the legacy of the people that came before, what we build upon. I love that, and how he discovers that wisdom for himself.
yeah, and it hit home for me pretty well because I have an uncle who is very into family history, and so he has traced back, 6 generations back to when, um, the first Sheehan walked off the boat from Ireland to
Mhm,
the USA. So I was like, this is like I get it. Like it's important
mhm,
to recognize your family, whether
mhm.
found or biological. Um,
Absolutely.
and it made me wonder, like now sitting here on this day right now, recording this, I'm like, I wonder how many characters that we know from phase two have a Kyber crystal that it's in that arch.
Right.
So there's lots of people that have given their lives valiantly for that to be there. And
Mhm,
I love that. Oh, because I'm such the same way. If I get handed this riddle like that, I'm actually like upset. I'm like, why did you give me this to me? Like, this is so stupid. Like, of course they cross it by themselves. Like, I felt like his way of thinking was exactly how I would deal with a riddle that like
mhm,
I don't want to be thinking about, and now I'm
mhm,
upset that I'm thinking about it. And it honestly just it's so much more rewarding to have the answer and to really have
mhm,
that epiphany at the end. Like,
mhm,
I can't believe I was mad about this. And also,
mhm,
like, this means so much more to me now. I can't believe Jorah Molly's
mhm,
gone and like this is her last thing, and
mhm.
what a last thing for it to be.
Well, let's talk about his new master at the end and Comac and his relationship with Orla Jurini. And Comac is one of my favorite characters of Phase One, and he's my favorite character in this book because he is a Jedi that I feel like I would relate to so much as an individual, because he is hyper focused on wanting to do the right thing. Like he is super focused on, I want to protect the light, I want to help as many people, but he really struggles with what the best way to do that is. He really questions Jedi Order's philosophies and their ways of doing things. And he has a lot of anger and darkness that he has been suppressing. And he's wondering, like, is it right for us to completely suppress these emotions and to push and hold the dark side completely at bay? And that goes from the trauma, some trauma he's experienced as a Padawan and losing his master the way he did to now, he feels like he's failing again in this instance. And him and Reith going forward are going to make a very interesting pair because of Reith's devotion to the Jedi and utter devotion to what they believe in, to Comac doing a lot of questioning. And I think it's going to be a case of, to some degree, iron sharpening iron, and we see that some in this book as well. But also Master Comac is a pretty like badass fighter, like in his way he takes on the Naya, how he fights the Dringir. He keeps like the two opposing sides at bay when they're just camping on the Maxine station by doing his levitation lightsaber whirling thing. I just really appreciate everything about Comac.
Yeah, he is wonderful, and I like that he's kind of a vehicle for the reader to get some folklore, as it said.
Mm-hmm.
He is like a Jedi folklorist, is kind of what he's called in this book.
Mm-hmm.
So he has studied all of these like ancient rituals, these ancient peoples. He's got really cool knowledge just off the top of his head that we do see get used here as he's trying to learn about and try to figure out how to deal with these dark side runes, how to deal with these statues that they believe that the dark side is imbued in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this is the perfect time or not, but he's kind of got two stories going on in this book.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the two people who have flashbacks going on. So Comac, we really kind of see why he's a folklorist actually in this book
Mm-hmm.
as well. Um, the death of his
We see
master
Yeah, we
kind of
see the
spurs
death
that
of his
on.
master and why, but I want to talk about the folklore aspect even more too, because it's why him and Reith also make such a great pair.
They
Because Reith,
a good pair.
he has like the facts and the book knowledge, and Comac is like, I go seek these things out in real life. Like I want you to Reith's gonna read the book about the artifacts that we're having. Comac's gonna be the one that goes and finds them in their natural environment where they were originally and bring them back. Like they just have this. He's like the archaeologist that's gonna go on site, do the excavation, and Reith is like, all right, you bring it back to me, and I'm gonna study it here at the lab. Like they have a very give and take in that. They kind of really complete each other into the ultra knowledge vacuum.
I feel like they're the two halves of Indiana Jones, archaeologist, and I'm going to go adventure and find it. Like both of them together make up
One
Indy.
Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
So yeah, give me the full just what your thoughts were on the backstory with Comac and Orla that we got. Like, what were your thoughts on that part? Because I'm curious what you took away from that section.
My thoughts on it in general.
Yeah, just in general. We don't have to. Such a to me like a smaller part of the main narrative that we
Yeah.
don't spend too much time on it.
I think it was divided into 6 parts that we get throughout the book. It was interesting. They go back to 25 years earlier than the current day story. Um, I kind of enjoyed it because I like when there's some backstory to
Mm-hmm.
a story. I can enjoy that, and I thought Claudia Gray did it pretty well
Mm-hmm.
because it directly related to why Comac is doing what he's doing in the present day. It's
Mm-hmm.
directly relates, kind of parallels what's going on, and they even explicitly say that Comac and Orla that they're like, we came to this section of space 25 years ago, and what a rough time we had, and now we're
Right.
coming back to the similar space,
Mm-hmm.
part of the map, and we're also experiencing like some pretty great distress. Like they're just stressed about like history repeating itself,
Mm-hmm.
the lessons
We're
that they
also stressed about
learned.
putting it right. Like let's get it right this
Let's
time.
correct it. Yeah. So uh, I kind of enjoyed the like retaking, like I don't know, I retaking trauma. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've had a bad experience here. Let's like correct it and deal with it. So I
What do
did
you
enjoy
think
it.
of Orla like as a character? Like personally, I really like Orla because I love the Wayseekers, and I just love the idea of Jedi that are just part of the order, but they go off and they just do their own thing, follow the force how they see fit, and it's okay to be that and question the council, because we've mentioned this so many times that Qui-Gon would totally be a Wayseeker if they still had
Mhm.
Wayseekers at the time of the prequels. And Orla to me is just very blunt and tells you how it is, but you don't feel bad when she does it necessarily, because she does it in a way where it's almost endearing. And her lightsaber, with a white lightsaber with the like white kyber crystals, and the way her lightsaber is just pretty really cool. Like that would be like my dream lightsaber, to have the one that goes zoom zoom, and then I can bring it right back, kind of like how Rey does, just without the evil aspect of it in the Rise of Skywalker.
Exactly. I can appreciate how that was introduced in The Rise of Skywalker, and then the High Republic team was like, "You know what? Let's redeem that. Let's make it a light side version." So it's very cool. And you do get instances in this, I believe, in this book, but throughout Phase One, where she uses it in both. She will have it
Mhm,
closed up, two sabers like parallel to each other.
mhm,
She'll flip it out and do some stuff. So it's a very cool tool. And she is Umbaran.
mhm.
So that Umbara arc in the Clone Wars, which is hard to watch through, she is Umbaran. It's kind of crazy.
Orla
But yeah,
Jareni versus Pong Krell. How does that go?
Orla clears 10 out of 10 times. Easy, no rematch. It's just it's over 2 seconds.
This debacle for Pong Krell. So the Jedi are obviously the heart of the High Republic stories, and they are like what this is all about. We're following the Jedi of the High Republic. But in all of these stories, there's usually a few non-Jedi that capture our imaginations, that capture our hearts. And I would have to say the amount of jokes that we've had about the vessel crew and Geode in particular over the years is quite a lot. So we have the vessel, we have its captain, Avihala, or its leader, Avihala. Liux Gyasi is the captain. I don't have a picture of him, but we also have Geode, the sentient rock himself. Just the amount of times over the years we've grabbed like a cool looking rock and said, taking Geode home with me. And the way that Claudia just writes him like as, oh yeah, Geode's at the club. He has a crazy nightlife. Oh yeah, that's right. Geo's navigating for us right now, and then he ends up saving Wreath later. It's just a phenomenal, just random Geode arc that he has. Just I wouldn't even call it an arc. It's just a cool, funny character that is integrated here. But let's talk about Affy. I mean, we're talking about someone who is the daughter of the leader of the Buying Guild, adopted daughter, and she's on this journey, discovers that the Amaxine station is being used as like a way station for smugglers and other, pilots for the Buying Guild. However, because it's such a dangerous journey to land on the Maxine station, use the hyperspace rings, and try to accelerate your journey that exists on there, many of them have lost their lives. And she learns that these people that are risking that are only the ones that are indentured servants to the Buying Guild and have nearly like maybe these lifetime sentences they're trying to work off. And the only reason they take those super dangerous assignments is because they're trying to get years off their journey. And she discovers that her parents were one of these, and her parents died because of these uh, really exploitive rules that are going on, and the exploitation of the Buying Guild. And her arc of going from loving her mom Scover, who is in charge of the Buying Guild, to discovering this about her parents, and then using that information, trying to get Scover to understand, doesn't really work out, takes it to the Republic, and essentially has her own mother arrested, and the Buying Guild to her life, everything she knows, completely evaporate because of she chooses to do the right thing. She's got absolute incredible moral fiber.
Yeah, that this is one of the harder ones to read because she's doing the right thing. She's also
Mhm,
finding out very traumatizing information, but she ends up
mhm,
doing the right thing. She turns in Scoverbine,
right.
our favorite Bival, not our favorite Bival actually.
Is there another Baval that we like more, or that we even
The
know of?
scientist that studies the Zillow Beast for Palpatine.
Is he's a Baval as well?
She's a Bival.
Oh, she's a Baval. Okay, I guess do we like that person more because they are trying to help Palpatine?
Yes. Actually, we like her more
Granted, did
because
this person, did they think that they were helping the Republic? Probably though.
Yeah, and I think they end up helping the Zilla Beast get free. So
Okay, so we do stand that scientist then.
whatever her
They're
name
number
is.
one. Okay, so
But
Scovervine is number two. She's like Scover's number two. Okay.
yeah, it's heart-wrenching to see that throughout this book, the beginning, she loves her mom so much that Scover has taken her in, has taught her all the ropes, has not given her a free handout to join any ship she wants. Like, I
Mhm,
mean, she's let Affy like go the hard route and like learn the hard lessons. And like
mhm,
Affy appreciates that about her mom. Affy really admires her mother. And for her to then find out horrible stuff about her and then eventually make
right.
the hard decision to turn her in, like you said, like it's hard to read, but like it gives you hope that like it inspired me that like, the hard decision is sometimes the best one. It's not
Mhm,
always the best to take the easy route out. So
mhm.
it's tough, but I mean, I
It's
gained
like
so
in
much
life.
respect for her.
Yeah. It's like in life, just because something feels safe and it does not mean the safe route is always the best route. Like just because something is comfortable or safer does not mean that's what's best for you or the people around you in the long run. And Afi like understands that. And she also understands like the greater good as well. Like, yes, I could sit on this information, wait till I take over the business in 20 years, and then I can enact all these changes. But in those 20 years, how many pilots are going to lose their lives because of this? How many pilots are going to be exploited and not have the freedom they deserve for another, 20 years? And she takes that information and says, I have to do this, even though it's uncomfortable, even though it makes her sick, even though she can't even fathom what Scover's going to say and do when she finds out that Affy's the one that turns her in effectively. It's a remarkable test of courage.
A test of courage,
Pun,
you say?
pun, pun unintended. Pun unintended. Given that we're talking about
Justina
test of
Ireland
courage,
joins the
Justina
chat.
Ireland's book. Justina Ireland just popped in and wanted to say a little bit something about
Friend of the
Vernestra Row.
pod.
Friend, friend of the podcast, Justina Ireland.
You know what book I just finished today was Spark of the Persistence by Justina Ireland. So,
Justina
anyways,
Ireland, friend of the pod, spark of persistence. Absolutely.
anyways,
Um, Fantastic. So, we talked about all this. So let's talk quickly about the Dringir. Okay. So we've talked about
okay.
these sentient dark side plants that exist, right? And once the Jedi, they remove the idols from the station, they get back to Coruscant once the hyperspace lanes are temporarily fixed for them. And they realize that they didn't, where the idols weren't the embodiment of the dark side. They were the one thing keeping the dark side at bay. And so they go back to the station and realize they have unleashed the Dringir. And the Dringir do not die from, like, you could slice them in half with your lightsaber, they will just regenerate, come back together, and keep attacking you. They speak as well. You see the mouth there if you're watching on YouTube. Like, these things speak. They have poisonous vines. They will absolutely tear you to pieces. And the Dringir are familiar with lightsabers because in the book there is, the Sith don't really have a role in the High Republic. We know they're out there, and that's the best part. We know they're out there, and the Jedi don't. But the Dringir were like, oh, that we've encountered their like before, their ancestors or something, but their blades were different. They were red. And Comac and Orla are like, wait, they're talking about the Sith, which means two things. The Drinker have been around for a long time because the Sith at this point are thought to be extinct for, hundreds, if not, or 1,000 years at this point, nearly. And so we know that the Drinker have been around a long time. They've been frozen in place by this for a long time. And two, the Sith were scared of the Drinker, that they felt they had to freeze them. And if they were a match for the Sith, Comac and Orla are like, these guys are bad news. Like, these guys are bad news.
That's a good coverage of the Sith kind of getting mentioned here in the High Republic. There's not a ton of mention of the Sith, and they definitely don't show up.
Mhm.
That's not part of the High Republic, but there's a few mentions, and this book contains one of the very few where we get just a mention of the Sith and how they worked alongside, maybe used, feared the Drengir. Another part of the Drengir's story is that they eliminated the
Mhm,
Amaxine warriors that this station is named after. This Amaxine race of people were
mhm,
just the most fearsome warriors and would never settle down. They were always looking for conflict. They would conquer an entire section of the galaxy and they would continue to look. They would continue to look for another war. And eventually, these people who almost just couldn't be stopped were
mhm,
indeed halted and destroyed by the Drengir. So I mean, that just tells you that like the galaxy's best
mhm.
could not stand up to these creatures.
And we're talking about the Amaxine warriors too here and the history of them. We're at the Amaxine station, and you're currently reading Bloodline, and the Amaxine warriors will play a role in Bloodline. I don't know if you've even gotten to that point
Not yet, but I
yet.
have the knowledge.
You've heard the rumblings.
I've heard the
You've
that's
heard.
literally all. I've just heard that they're there.
Okay, so the Maxing Wars clearly are playing a role in Star Wars as a whole, and play a role in the origins of the First Order. It's incredible, like the way that they interweave all of these things throughout. And so with the Dringir, they're fighting the Dringir. They have to get these idols, back in place to stop what is a possible Dringir invasion of the galaxy. That's what they want. They want to go, they want to feed on, you know, the meat
The
and,
meat.
kill people. And Wreath gets transported via one of the hyperspace rings on the Maxine station to where Dez got transported when they believed he died. And he encounters, the Dringir and Dez, who has basically been tortured and drugged by them. And they duel each other until Wreath is finally able to get under his protection, or his, I guess, what would you call it, like he makes his way past the poison and is able to confuse him enough to subdue him and get him out of there,
I
and
believe
the
he
Dringir
even
are right
disarms
on his
him.
tail. Yes.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
Dringir follow him back to the station.
exactly. And just to quickly explain how that's happening, there are these hyperspace rings that are immensely
Mhm,
powerful that can shoot a pod through hyperspace only using like a tenth of the power of like an
mhm,
engine on a ship. So it's like this crazy advanced technology that happened way back in the past that these Amaxines had. So one
mhm,
of the trajectories that is preset into these pods in the hyperspace rings goes to this planet that I don't remember the name of, but it has a bunch of Drengir on them that are still active and alive.
mhm,
Um, and so the return trip is also preset. And so there's two pods there, the one that Dez took, the one that Wreath took. So Wreath gets Dez into one, they go, and the Drengir take the other spare one and follow back. So that's a very fun part of the book that,
mhm.
you know, Wreath is trying to navigate. And I read this last summer on the cruise with you, and I
I
listened to this
remember.
audiobook just a month ago, 3 weeks
Let me
ago.
talk. Hold on. I just wanted to say, like, it was fantastic how we're on a cruise. Our significant others are enjoying the sun. They're enjoying the pools. They're enjoying the drinks. Everything is flowing. Everything's nice. And there's literally me and you sitting side by side in the shade, reading Master and Apprentice into the dark. It's
I,
literally what happened.
I believe you did Master and Apprentice and Lost Stars. I think you
I
did two
no, I
books.
think I did both of them. Yes, I think it was Into the Dark or no, I think it was Master and Apprentice and Lost Stars that I did.
That's what I
Did a lot
thought.
of
So
reading.
we read a lot of Claudia Gray on that cruise. Um,
We actually we did. But that
I
was
didn't
we were
even
just having a Claudia. I didn't even realize it was
I
just
didn't even
straight
realize
Claudia
that.
Gray on that trip. Uh, she just she always delivers. Master and Apprentice. I didn't even mention that at the beginning when we were talking about great Claudia Gray books. Like Master and Apprentice has got
Oh,
to be up there, and the
yeah,
freaking nameless are dropped in Master and Apprentice. Just awesome.
amazing. We
Claudia Gray just
we get to talk about that a lot more here pretty
mhm,
soon.
yes.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of wraps up the quick of the like
Mhm,
ring there, ring back.
mhm. And they realize they have to destroy the station or the rings around the station because the Dringir cannot have control of these because they could infest and attack numerous worlds. The Nile, who are on the station here, cannot have possession of the rings because the Nile could easily just launch these pods and be like different saboteurs or spies at the different locations in the Republic. For all we know, they can launch a pod straight to Coruscant and, sabotage something there and then get right back out. This is like a critical place to be. Like, it's a critical location, strategic location. They have to eliminate those pods and they destroy them to make sure that neither the Nile or the Dringir are able to use them in the future.
Which is always a heartbreaking trope when there's an item that can be used by anyone and you have to destroy it or make sure that no one can use it because the bad
Mhm.
people will inevitably cause more bad than you can probably do good with it. So
Mhm.
it's just one of those where it just can't exist. It's too
Mhm.
tempting, it's too powerful to be trusted in the
Mhm.
wrong hands.
Right. And let's close out here. Let's talk about Nan just a moment because Nan is a Nile, and Reed and then meets, for the first time when they're on the station for the first time. Reed, protects her from these gangsters who are trying to take advantage of her and kidnap her, and he protects her. He has no idea she's a Nile at first. He learns this later on, and comes back. They're encountered again, and he kind of meets the real Nan. At first, she's kind of like this flirtatious, like tried to put on the facade of being like a helpless young girl just to learn as much as she could about the Jedi Order. And Reith was so happy to oblige. He loves talking about the Jedi, and he was even a little smitten with Nan, for a little bit. And we get to see the real Nan later on. But even beyond that, Reith says something, and Claudia points this out, that he could tell that not all of what he met before was a facade. Like, some of that was the real Nan. She was Nile, but not all of that was necessarily fake. There's part of her that I think that Reith really wants to believe in, that can choose good and that could turn around. And I think that's interesting, that as we're going to see her go deeper and deeper into, the darkness of the Nile, and Reith is going to keep pushing further and further from the, into the light. I just think it's very interesting in phase one, how these two are depicted, but especially just that brief encounter. And I thought Nam was going to be a throwaway character, to be honest, but we meet her she's in several other High Republic novels after this, and High Republic moments. So she's anything but a throwaway character.
Exactly. That's probably my favorite thing about the High Republic is that many different novels will have the same storyline pickup or the same characters that come back. It's just got to be my favorite thing. And so yes, Nan becomes even larger and larger of a role in the Nile.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Reith is going into the Light, which is the name of the novel coming by Claudia Gray in phase. Okay, sorry. Um,
Wait, oh, that's right. Oh my goodness. So I cannot wait. I gotta review that one. Like, I gotta tell Nate. Like, I gotta review that one. So I think Nate, he heads up our, books and publishing, stuff at Star Wars Newsnet. So I got a feeling he's gonna want to do the Charles Soule, like, grand finale
Fire
of
of
the
the
High
Jedi.
Republic. And who can blame him? It's the grand finale of what we've been up to. But I would love to do the young adult grand finale with like Claudia Gray like headlining it. Also, like, Claudia starts off strong into the dark. Not a big fan of Fallen Star. It's my least favorite Claudia Gray Star Wars novel, which is
I can agree. I'm with you there.
um, which, saying that, isn't like, the all the others she's done are like masterpieces or just really, really freaking good. So I mean, it's not like you're saying like, oh, this is an F novel or something, but it is not my favorite. It is lower on my list of High Republic books in general. So I would love to read, like, I call it the redemption arc of Claudia Gray. She's going to redeem the Fallen Star a little bit,
Don't
and
call
she's
it a
going to
comeback.
drop an absolute banger to close out the young adult novels. I cannot wait to read that. What is that? February, March
That
of
is
25?
April 1st or May 6th. May 6th, April 1st,
Okay,
one
so
of
it's like
those.
right before then
Yeah.
the final book
It's
from Soul.
wave 3 of phase 3 is 3 months in a row. It's April 1st, May 6th, June 17th.
Okay, I bet it's May. I bet they do the like middle grade, and then the young adult, and then the adult novel. That's what I would bet. Okay.
I bet.
All right. Well, do you have anything else? I have one last question for you about this book before we actually wrap up here. And it is, how many death sticks do you think Leox Jossi has had in his life?
In his life,
More or less than 125.
more. This man is a California surfer dude. Just to picture him transplanted in Star Wars, he's absolutely doing a death stick a day, if not two. He needs to go home and rethink his life, low key. He's a great
He's
character, though.
also
He's a great
awesome
person.
because he cares so much for Abby. He looks
He
out for
does.
her. He wants to protect her. He calls her a little bit. And,
Little
I love it all. So that's Into the Dark. Fun discussion here. Love a good book discussion. We will be talking about Test of Courage by Justina Ireland next week, which introduces my favorite High Republic character, Vernestra Rowe. So, in the Light Whip. So, we're going to be talking about Vernestra Rowe, who's, in that upper echelon of characters for me. And I know Luke, loves some Vernestra Rowe, Imri Kantaros.
Absolutely.
And so, like, we're going to be talking about that book next week. Be a shorter conversation because it's a shorter book. Make sure you follow us on Apple or Spotify at Star Wars Newsnet, where you get your podcasts. Hit that 5-star button. Leave us a little review, please, because we want to keep bringing you the Timeline Show every Saturday. You can always catch us on Thursday nights for Star Wars Newsnet Live, 10 o'clock Eastern on YouTube. You can also catch the audio for that on one of our podcast channels if you haven't seen that already. If you're curious about other moments in the timeline, just go back for the Timeline Show, playlist and go back. See, we've been covering everything since Phase 3 of the High Republic. We'll be moving our way up through the timeline as we go. And the best part right now is that by the time we get done with all this Phase 1 stuff, we'll be entering into the end of Phase 3. And so we'll be able to pretty much finish out Phase 3 right after Phase 3, comes out. So that's going to be like a really fun way for us to conclude like all of the High Republic stories and then move into some prequel era stuff, which I know is where we will absolutely thrive. So I'm looking forward to all of that and more. Make sure you check out the Monday Show podcast coming out every Monday. Luke and I are going to be talking about some Mando and Grogu topics that you will not want to miss. Luke, as always, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Timeline Show. We're in the 30s now. Timeline Show number 30. It's a great time. We're over halfway to a full year of Timeline Shows. Well on our way to a full year of Timeline Shows. Hopefully we can keep doing our Timeline Shows for the next 100 years. That would be fantastic. That would be wonderful. Everyone, thank you for joining. Hit that subscribe button on your YouTube channel. Join us every Thursday, Star Wars Newsnet. Check out Star Wars Newsnet for all of your Star Wars news and needs. We cover everything in the galaxy far, far away. For Light and Life, everyone, and remember that we are all